This is Dan Conrad from One Identity. And today I'm going to talk to you about one of our zero trust concepts, which is known as zero standing privilege. I'm going to be addressing just a brief agenda here, and I'm going to address the terminology and then talk about how this applies to the real world or to your environment as we see it today. First, the terminology. This is under the assumption that you've at least taken a look at NIST 800-207, which is the zero trust architecture. And the realization that zero trust is that it's an architecture or a model to look at or to steer towards. It's more of a goal than an actual destination. So our object is to reduce the amount of trust of other systems, implicit trust or implied trust, so that when we're building a new system or even have the opportunity to modify an existing information system, that we have a mindset towards operating towards a zero trust mentality or questioning how things authenticate and what things should be trusted to talk to what. The core concept I'm addressing today is the concept of zero standing privilege. This is the concept of utilizing accounts to perform elevated tasks that technically have no privileges to do so until we need them to actually do that. The accounts themselves are said to have zero standing privileges because they're disabled. They don't have group memberships that would allow them to do things, and the permissions aren't necessarily assigned to allow them to do that. The privileges will be granted on an on-demand basis and strictly by policy as designed by the corporation. The privileges, again, after assigned, will be removed when not in use and removed consistently so that they're reversed back to, again, a state of zero standing privilege or zero trust in this case. We compare this to our old least privilege model that we've been working on for years and really getting the users and the administrators and the people that need elevated rights the exact set of permissions that they need to do something. When we build that into our environment, that's really said to be a persistent privilege. So if I'm a new administrator to an environment, you will focus on the rights that I need to administer the systems that I need to do, and then not have permissions on anything that I don't need to administer. So that's compared to a zero standing privilege where in a zero standing privilege environment, I wouldn't necessarily have the rights to do anything unless I actually had the task assigned to me or was approved to go do that. So then we can elevate those permissions when they need to be elevated. Again, comparing this to persistent privilege is the old school way of doing it where we would set the permissions up and they would be there always and available whenever I needed them, as opposed to assigning those permissions just in time and giving that administrator, in this case, the access that they need just to do exactly what they need to do when they need to do it. And the reason for this is the elevated privileges or the persistently elevated privileges are always a target for attack. I look at a lot of this from an Active Directory perspective, and in an Active Directory environment, the elevated credentials or the keys to the kingdom accounts, such as domain admins, enterprise admins, schema admins, all of those default accounts are usually a target for attack. The least privilege model in this case, again, still requires persistent elevation. So that's the way we used to do it, where a new administrator comes on board and eventually they get the rights to have access to the domain admins group because of either a trust relationship, a personal trust relationship with the organization, or because they have the required skills, or simply because they need to complete a task that requires that level of elevation. So we give them that consistent or that persistent privilege in this case. Again, that's very convenient to do. And even the least privilege model requires quite a bit of effort to dial that down to the exact permission and to fine tune those. But what usually happens is most administrators in this case, or most people that require elevated credentials, have far more than they need to use on a daily basis simply because they might need that. And in an Active Directory world, there are additional protections that really help out a lot. And the concept of a just-in-time permissions model significantly aids in securing Active Directory because of the single sign-on nature and the residual hashes and things like that in Active Directory. So I'm going to walk you through what this looks like when you use it in the real world in a scenario that shows zero standing privilege. The environment I'm in right now is an Active Directory environment. My account itself has no permissions to do anything of any level of privilege in the environment. But what I do have the right to do is check out a privileged account to go use on any system that would require that. So if I would need to a password to something like a domain admin account, I can go check that out, but I don't specifically know one off the top of my head. I don't have access to one. So in this case, I'm going to go grab one of these. You see it here as a temporary domain admin account. And let's take a look at that account. You can see right here that it's not a member of any group. So right now, it's not really a domain admin. Additionally, I don't know what the password to this account is, so I don't have any credential to use it. And you can see by the big red X on the account that it's disabled. So let's go into my Safeguard PAM solution on the right side and check out that credential. In this case, I'll go check out a password because maybe I need to do something in the Active Directory environment that requires me to know a password for one of these accounts. I'm going to go select the account. And I'll go get the SG Temp DOM admin one that I just showed you, and we'll check that out. I can add it to my favorites right here if I use it frequently. I'm going to go ahead and submit the request. This goes off to my manager for approval, and it comes back approved in a certain amount of time. Now I can see it's approved and available. So if I come back over into Active Roles, looking at Active Directory, and I see that account, I can see here that it's tagged as checked out from Safeguard. The big red X is gone, that the password or the account is now enabled. And now it is a member of this privileged group that gives me access to do what I need to do. So now I can go retrieve that password and use it any way that I would need to, whether I push an agent in an Active Directory environment or something like that, and go retrieve that password. Then when I'm done using that account, I simply come back into Safeguard. Whether I have it for the day or I have it for a couple of hours, I can check it back in, and it basically reverses the process. In addition, it changes the password on the account so that no human knows what that password is. So now it's disabled and the group membership has been stripped. So that account is back to its zero standing privilege or useless state. Let's take a quick look at what I just showed you in that demo. So the concept of zero standing privilege is invoked here by two solutions from one identity. First off, the credential vault, which is Safeguard. Safeguard is taking care of those credentials that are stored in Active Directory and other systems. And in this case, I've got one identity Active Roles running as well. So it's acting as the account lifecycle manager. It's able to dynamically manipulate Active Directory to meet the needs of just-in-time provisioning. And sitting in between the two is a broker that's listening to Safeguard and listening for account checkouts and telling Active Roles that the accounts have been checked out, and Active Roles takes action based on that policy that you built as to what roles and groups those will be assigned to. So let's take a quick look at the core concept of zero standing privilege here. So as the administrator, you won't have that privileged password. You won't have the credential for the account. You may have a personally assigned privileged account, but you won't know the password to that, and it may be disabled when not in use. But what you will have is a permission to check out that account. When that account is checked out, the account will be elevated as needed. So the privileges are assigned on the fly, and you determine by policy which privileges those accounts will be assigned when they're checked out. And then, of course, the accounts need to be enabled when they're in use. It's a big piece of this picture. The other side of the zero standing privilege is reverting it back to zero. So privileges are removed when not in use. And of course, in an Active Directory environment, as in many environments, it's very important to change the password upon check-in. And then, of course, the accounts are made ineligible for logon or disabled in this case. So that really locks down your zero standing privilege environment. So the accounts are returned to zero when not in use. So this is a brief look at the zero standing privilege. If you have more questions on this, please take a look at our Zero Trust page at oneidentity.com/solutions/zero trust. Thanks for your time.